Welcome to Narratives and Nightcaps, Books, Beverages, and Author Conversations. Today I am joined by Amy Hendrickson, book coach, editor, and writer herself. And today we are here to talk about all sorts of things, but mostly her novel, Dear Alderone. Welcome, Amy.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's so good to chat with you. I'm very excited. And before we jump in, I'm going to kick things off, turn it over to you to introduce any sort of nightcap that you have for this book, for your writing style, anything.
Well, I thought about this a lot. So this book in particular, Dear Alderone, has some not great things to say about alcohol. So I don't think it would be in my best interest to suggest to suggest an alcoholic beverage. But my favorite non-alcoholic beverage that sort of masquerades as one is equal parts grapefruit juice and sparkling water with just a little bit of nutmeg, which is kind of weird, I realize, but like it makes you think that you're sort of, like in the mix of things with cocktails. Nobody asks any questions about it because it's pink and fuzzy and and fizzy and you're good to go. So, and I love it. I drink it actually
I
a
like
lot this
that.
time of year. I love it. Yeah. When my child was little, we didn't do a lot of pop. We didn't do a lot of soda. And so we would do sparkling water and juice. And so she ended up seeing a bartender, I don't know, on a show. And so we had all sorts of different juices and pops and and fizzy water, sparkling water. And so we tried it and we just both decided that this was the best thing in the world. So it's especially good in the summertime.
Well, I was about to say, it sounds just very refreshing, and I do love grapefruit juice.
Yeah.
So wonderful. It could be a nice little summer mocktail. Those are always
Yeah,
good to have.
definitely.
Good to have a nice simple recipe ready to go. All right, well, let's get right into Dear Alderone. What inspired this? Was there a specific moment or idea that sparked this story?
Oh, that's a really loaded question. Yes and no, and then yes again. Dear Alderone
Okay. Oh, I
yeah.
need details.
Dear Alderone originally began a portion of Dear Alderone was the first novel I wrote that I completed, a portion of it, in a very different form. So I graduated from college with my shiny new degree, and I was going to be an English teacher because I loved high school, and that was what I was going to do. So the year that I graduated, the where we live, the county where we live, pink slipped about 400 teachers, and suddenly everybody was out of a job. And so little old me with my little degree was not even getting interviews. And I ended up working then for a friend of mine who had an office that was not busy, and I would go in and open up in the morning and write my book. And so I wrote about the only thing that really I knew about at the time, which was teaching English and being in high school because I was that young. So, and I really liked it. And so the core story from the 1980s of Jira in high school keeping a journal for a year during her ninth grade or during her freshman year in high school. That's where that started. However, that was even a different year. So that finished. I was happy with it, started sending it out, had some interest. I thought, oh, this publishing stuff is easy, right? You write a book, you get a publisher interested in it, and there we go. The first publisher that I found who liked it was we were in talks for selling it, and I thought, see, yeah, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And I ended up getting the entire packet. This is back in the day when you sent like real things out, like physical hard copies out. Um, and the editor who had liked my work had quit, and so they had cleaned out her desk and sent all of her stuff back, and that was the end of that. Anyway, years went by. I wrote other books. I did other things. I still really liked Alderone, but it needed updating. So I updated it to a different time, but kept the core story. And then my very young husband got diagnosed with a brain tumor. And so my life was spent focusing on keeping him healthy and raising my daughter, and I mean, all of those things that happens with life, and I ended up writing for other people, but I still really liked Alderaan. And so one day I pulled out the manuscript, updated the core story again, and then added this element to it that the journals that had been written in the 80s were discovered today. And so then I decided that the person who wrote them, Jira, who wrote them in the 80s, I put her through many of the same things that my husband went through. She had the same health issues, the same surgery issues, because it was, again, I knew what I was writing about there. So anyway, so started out and then went on hold and then ended up where it is now.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Yeah. So, oh my goodness. I mean, I never really know where when you ask a question like that, like what's going to happen, because we
Yeah.
always reading it have sort of an idea in mind, which is never accurate. Never accurate with the true story of where it originated for the author. So, wow, that's I mean just really incredible, and to see like and know how, I guess, personal it is for you too. Like it's not just a scene or a character that came to you. Um in all of that time, and was there anything from the beginning that like a certain scene that just lived with you that you like kept coming back to in your mind over those years too?
Yeah, the scene, so the key, the core, sort of core of the journal entries, the core of the 1980s story happens whenever there's a major, major loss to one of the major characters. He suffers a major loss. And that scene where the whole family discovers that this tragedy has happened, and then how it affects them, nothing has changed with that. That's been consistent through the whole thing. Through the whole story, Jira, who is 14 and turns 15 during the course of the novel, her older brother gets engaged and thinks that his whole life is ahead of him, and he has the beginnings of an addiction issue. And so she's sort of wrestling with that because he's turning into this person that she didn't really know, and she sees him doing things that are typical for somebody with addiction issues, that is very foreign to who she knows her brother is. And so whenever this tragedy strikes and he has to deal with the fallout of that, none of that changed. How the whole family sort of comes together and in a very 1980s way tries to figure out how they're going to cope with this tragedy. That has not changed at all.
I mean, it's like kind of impressive though too that you have kept those, and I get again, I think that comes back to like a lot of the personal ties to it. But with all of that, I mean, these are some very deep emotions and experiences that the characters are going through, or reading about, because there's both happening too. I guess, what do you hope readers walk away with when they read this?
Well, at its heart, I think that Alderaan is about how teenagers, regardless of what generation they grow up, coming of age has certain things that are consistent across generations. And the core story is like, what would you do if what would you think if your grandchildren read the journals that you wrote when you were in high school? And so I like those conversations that people have. And one of the elements of it has to do with the privacy issue. So the way the novel starts out is, I didn't mean to read her journals, and it is Jira's granddaughter, who is 14 today, a teenager today, who has come home from the hospital and is trying to find pictures, family pictures, to take to her grandmother, because her grandmother did not remember who she was, and her grandmother is her guardian. And so she's sort of freaking out about what this means. She's already had some loss in her life. And when she finds the journal, she realizes immediately that this is not what she's looking for. And yet she can't help but read them. And so some of the conversations, I've had with people have to do with the privacy issue. Like, I realize this is an invasion of privacy, but it happened when you were 15, and it makes me feel close to you because 'cause you're the same age I am now, and, I don't know, I like wrestling with that. Like, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, I love I love novels and stories that challenge you to really think about what you would do in that position too. But even just with the way your story is told, it brings up not only memories from like own high school experiences and like you said coming of age, but then okay, what would I do if I was in this position? But then also own family memories, whether it's been like a certain experience that's the exact same that these characters go through, it still brings up your own memories and your own relationship with family members, which I think is, really beautiful, even though sometimes those memories are hard to process. Like, I guess I really enjoyed that it was so layered, even in your own experience with reading it. There's so many ties to a personal experience with that. So, I guess, were there any scenes or characters that surprised you in your writing process? Ones that maybe didn't go as you expected initially?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yes and no. When I first pardon me, when I wrote the core story of the journal entries in the 1980s, I was pantsing my way through it for a while, right? It was the original version was the first book that I had ever written from start to finish, and I had nothing else to do in the mornings because work was just work at the office wasn't anything. And so I would just sort of feel my way. By the time I revisited it to expand it and add the modern day element to it, I was much more familiar with what goes into crafting a story. So the first time through, there's a death, there's a loss that happens around Valentine's Day. And I was totally unprepared for how it would affect me. The character was so real to me that when they passed away, I went through the rest of the day and I was just in this funk, right? And I was just like, "Yeah, I just killed off this character," and it really did affect me. So I was totally unexpected, I did not expect that to happen. Um, I did not expect playing God to affect me so much.
Oh, that's so interesting. I've always kind of wondered that, especially when you read a novel that as a reader, it brings up all of these emotions in you. And I always think about it. I'm like, did the author experience this at the same time when they were writing it? Because it evokes such like deep emotions in some cases. I always think there's no way they didn't feel this too when they were writing it.
Yeah, no, I actually think that that's important. If I write a scene that's an emotionally charged scene for any reason, if it fails to move me, how can I expect it to move my reader? So, you don't want to be manipulative. I think that there's a certain line you have to walk there to not force your reader to feel a particular way. But I think that being able to mine real emotion and hopefully finding a way to communicate that just through the printed word. Like I said, if it doesn't affect me, I shouldn't expect it to affect anybody else.
Yeah, I think that it comes through in your writing when that happens. So now that we've kind of gotten like this background, and the years and the time and the personal experiences that went into this, I'm sure like just with all of that, there's a lot of challenges that you had to overcome. So what kept you going and pushing through and wanting to create this story?
Hmm. Well, at first, in the early years, I just liked the story. I liked the characters. I liked spending time with them, and I thought that the core story had merit. Then whenever I added the added element, with the grown up where the person that we knew as a teenager was now grown up and had her own problems that she could not possibly have foreseen when she was 15. Um, I would look at what my husband was dealing with as he was, going through various medical situations. And I just thought, we have no idea at any point in our life what the future holds. And I think that's a good thing, right? Like, I don't want to know what's going to happen tomorrow. If I did, I might just stay in bed. um, and I think that's really I think that's kind of really the main thing is no matter what happens, there's always an element of wonder and adventure for each day that that I think is really important to hold on to.
Yeah, when I got a copy of your book and was so excited, in it you wrote "Embrace the adventure," and just like that little reminder of it, and sort of setting up, what this story was and what it could be to me too, was so nice. And so yeah, I think that that's a really beautiful way to put it. Having worked behind the scenes on books as a ghostwriter, like you mentioned, and a book coach, how does it feel to sort of be in the spotlight then with your own? I guess what are some of the major differences that most people probably don't think about, because there aren't many people that we meet that are both a ghostwriter, book coach, and an author with their name on the book.
Yeah, well, that right there is the main difference. So I've ghostwritten books where the people that I wrote the book for were very happy and agreed to put my name on the cover. So yay! So that's really cool. But it's like, it was still their ideas, their methodology. And when I coach, I'm only doing my job really well if I can take you through writing your book in such a way that I am invisible, right? And ghosting as well. So it is very nice. There are many books out there that I cannot point to and say, I did that, right? Because that's kind of part of the point of being a ghostwriter. It's like, I can't even mention them. And unless the client wants to talk about how they've hired me to write their book for them, it's just like, yeah, I did that, but I can't tell you about it. It's very neat. It's very neat to be able to say, I did this and no one else did.
Yeah, they're like, this is my story. These really are my words, the characters that mean something to me, and for you too. Like, there's so many elements of you and the life that you've lived in this one.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is unusual. For instance, I have ghostwritten a book. I've ghostwritten books for people who were at a big conference and invited me to go to the conference to meet them there. Yep, okay, I'll do that. That'll be great. And when I showed up, snubbed me completely because they didn't want somebody else to know that I had written their book. I'm like, well, you invited me, dude. I mean, it's like, it's all right. I didn't have to come. So yeah, it's ghostwriting. It can be it can be just an interesting pastime in and of itself. So it is very nice to have a book that there are no other strings attached to. It's just mine.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I bet that's very interesting. So, I mean, that aside, how do you balance like your own creative voice with the voices of clients when you're ghostwriting?
Oh,
Just to make sure that you are solely focused on theirs.
yeah. Actually, that's not difficult. When I ghostwrite a book, my whole job is to disappear completely, right? If I shine through it all, I have not done my job well. The first person that I wrote, that I ghosted a book for, has a very distinctive voice. He comes from Australia. He had his own TV show at the time. People knew who he was. So it would be really easy for me to know if I failed to get his voice right. So what I do is I'm in the process actually of ghosting a book right now for somebody. And when we meet, I ask you questions, you tell me about whatever it is, you answer my questions because they have to be, the book has to make sense. And then I take that transcript and make sure that that transcript is faithful. So for instance, certain things I look for are, I take into consideration my clients' level of education. How long are your sentences? What words do you tend to use more often than others? How do you express yourself when you're upset? How do you express yourself when you're really excited about something? All of those things, it's just like creating a character. So if I'm going to write a movie script, for instance, I will do the same thing to make sure that my characters stay consistent, and I use the same process whenever I ghost.
Oh, that is so interesting. I'm like kind of fascinated by that. I never really thought about it in that way with ghostwriting a whole book like that too, because I was like, I wonder how, like, I know there is that element of needing to really understand the voice, which I can kind of relate to on a marketing level, because like when I've worked with a lot of other businesses, you have to understand the voice and the tone of that business or organization or person. So, but that's really interesting that I mean, it's almost like an interview to really
Yeah.
dive into how
Yep.
they speak.
It's an extended interview, and just as you'll have a style sheet for editing a book and making sure that, for instance, you approach dates the same way or titles the same way, let's say. I have a style sheet for ghosting for ghosting clients, and I will have, for instance, the first book I ghost wrote, like I said, was for this person. He was Australian. He had never graduated high school. He had his own TV show. He was a rising star. He had a huge following, right? So I had to get it right. The next book I ghost wrote was for somebody who was also a star in his own right, in a different element in the industry, but this was an extremely educated person who was at the pinnacle of his career, who dealt only with like the tippy top, the 1% of the 1%, um and had a completely different approach to life. So his style sheet was quite different. His sentences were much longer. His way of approaching things was much more complex because he was used to dealing with a different level of experience in his clientele. So, yeah, it's just a matter of being consistent and getting their voice right.
Very cool. I just am fascinated by the whole process. That's so interesting. Did you bring in any, I don't want to say like a book coach, were there any other voices that you turned to in the midst of writing Dear Alderone to get additional perspective or feedback on any of the characters that really helped you throughout the years to eventually turn the story into what it is today?
Interesting. Well, uh, Dear Alderone, when I had it, when I was shopping it around, at one point I had two separate agents over the course of several different times that were shopping it around, and I always asked for feedback to see if there was anything that they thought needed to be changed or anything, and they didn't really have any suggestions. What I kept doing though was I wanted to make sure that well, I wanted to make sure that the teenage voice was right. And my daughter, at the time that I did not the rewrite, that I updated it and had a modern day child in it, she and her friends gave me a lot of insight into making sure I got the modern teenager's voice right. Yeah. And then I also
Oh, I love
but
that. That's
but I also wanted to make sure that the modern teenager wasn't set in a particular, era, right? So because Jira is a teenager in 1984, 1985, that is set in stone. However, as the grandmother, Jira can be a grandmother now for quite a while. And so I wanted to make sure that the modern day teenager wasn't to, 2022 or 2025.
okay. Oh, I love that. And I love that your daughter was like even more involved in the process too. That's
Oh,
really,
yeah,
really
very much
special.
so.
You that's so cool. Let's see. So you sent me some just I love it when people do this, and I didn't want to like totally use all of them, but you sent me an awesome like discussion guide playlist for the book, which has contemporary and 1980s, which is just perfect. I love it when I'm sure that's like an extra step and a lot of extra work for you, but I thought that was so cool. So I thought we would talk a little bit about one of the sections on your discussion guide since you have that there, which because this had me thinking too as I was thinking back to like my high school experience and my creative writing classes that I took and whatnot. So journaling and self-reflection, obviously a very one of the key elements of this book. So, what are your thoughts on Mrs. Taylor's year-long journaling assignment? And as I mean, you're talking about, I saw myself as this teacher and then that didn't happen. Is this something you yourself would have assigned?
Definitely. Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes. So, yeah, the core of the book for people who haven't read it is when Jira's at the beginning of Jira's freshman year in 1984, her teacher assigns everybody in class a year-long assignment that they have to keep a journal. And those are the journals then that her granddaughter discovers years later. Would I do that as a teacher? Yes. And I'm an enormous fan of the merits and the valid elements of journaling for just 1,000 reasons. More today even than I was before the advent of AI taking people's voices, right? Or trying to convince you not to use your own voice. Um, the merits of journaling and wrestling with the words and finding a way to express yourself, whether you use journaling as a diary, whether you use it as a mindset exercise, whether you use it just as a way to keep creative writing. And through the course of the book, Jira tries all of those sorts of things, right? You can see her sort of playing around with poetry sometimes, and she ends up using it mostly as a journaling exercise. But even then, you can see that her writing improves as the year goes on because she gets more and more comfortable using her words to express how she feels, and it becomes very cathartic for her. So, big fan.
And this is so small too, but you can see where she crosses out certain things because she's like either doesn't know for sure how to spell it or what to say. And I'm like, "Oh, I feel that so much because that looks like mine. That looks like me whenever I journal where you're like, "Oh, nope, that's not coming out the way I want it to." Cross that out and on to the
Yeah.
next.
Yeah, in a perfect world, it would have been so cool in a perfect world to have the journal be like with doodles in the side and and things because it's like no high school girl's journal is complete without noodling things in the sides and stuff crossed out and I don't know, homework lists and yeah. It's just yeah, I would love it to be this just mess, but that's not feasible for a novel.
Right. A little challenging, but still just even that touch makes it feel so real. Um so I mean just with all of your experiences like there's so imagine just a lot of great advice you could give to writers or anyone who's an aspiring writer. So I guess what would you give to someone who maybe feels like their novel is either like too big or too personal in order for them to finish it?
Ooh. Oh, that's interesting. Well, I have thoughts on that. One of the things I tell people I do a
Oh yeah,
lot
no,
with
that's
I work a lot with people who are writing narrative nonfiction who are writing their own personal story. So if you are writing a story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and you feel that it's too personal, my advice is always make sure that, especially if you intend to publish it and make it available for public consumption, that you are writing from a place of scarring rather than an open wound. One of the projects I'm ghostwriting right now is because the client was writing from what she thought was a place of scarring. And as we got into it, she looked at the scope of what she was about to undertake and got overwhelmed. The book was all mapped out, and she's a beautiful writer, but she got overwhelmed because there were some things that still hadn't been addressed. And so, writing for catharsis can be incredibly important and very useful and very therapeutic. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you then need to capitalize on your pain for someone else's enjoyment. So some things may never see the light of day and still have their uses. But if you're writing about something that's very, very personal, and you're okay with exploring that in a way that is not going to cause you harm, then realize that your voice is yours to do with whatever you want, right? No one else has your voice. No one else in the history of the universe has ever been given your voice or has ever had your experiences or sees your experiences in the way that you do. And so the way you decide to put those experiences on paper and in print is entirely up to you. So, work through it. You know, if you write something that you don't like, that doesn't mean it's terrible, and it doesn't mean you're a bad writer. It means you can write something else that you do like. When you write something down, that doesn't mean that it is carved in stone. You can always re-edit it. You can always work with it, play with it. If you're writing nonfiction, and it comes from a place that is maybe too close to you, practice making it fiction. How would you like it to turn out? So there's all sorts of things you can do to play with the words and make them yours, in a way that's healthy, that you enjoy. Because once you go to start then turning that into a book and you start looking into publishing, other people are going to get involved and other people are going to have opinions about what you've written. And so it's important that you like what you've written enough that you can withstand negative opinions, that you can withstand people that you can withstand disinterest. So it's important that you love what you've written enough that you can then nurture it through the process of getting published.
That is all very well said, and so such good advice to any type of writer out there. So we're gonna have to save that clip for everybody that definitely needs it. Because that's incredible. Um, what about, like, when would you say a writer needs to explore either employing a ghostwriter or looking at getting a book coach to assist them?
Oh, that's interesting. There are several valid reasons. There are many valid reasons. For employing a ghostwriter, I'll address those first. So typically, people who hire ghosts, ghostwriting is expensive. A good ghostwriter is very expensive. Um, and so typically, the people who hire ghostwriters um, are people who have a definite story that they want to tell or who have a methodology that they are looking to profit from in some way, right? So a lot of times people who hire ghostwriters, it's either a celebrity who wants to tell their story or it is somebody who's in business, let's say, who is looking to become a thought leader. And so in that case, it typically has to do with time. Like I want to do this thing. It's going to take me forever to do it. I'm a very, very busy person. I'd rather just hire somebody who knows what they're doing and we can get this done. All right. So typically with ghostwriting, it has to do with a time element, right? It's like, I want to do this. I need to do it. It's on my list of things to do. I have plans for the book when it exists. I'm going to hire somebody to do it and we're going to move on. When it comes to coaching, my coaching clients, typically they're across the board. I coach people nonfiction, I coach screenwriters, I coach novelists, and they all come from a place of, I want to learn to do it myself. I love the work. I love the process of learning, and I don't care how long this takes. I want to learn to do it myself. In coaching, the journey is as much fun as the destination, because I had a client earlier today. We've been working together. He's near the end of the draft of his book, and his writing has improved enormously just in doing the work, showing up week after week after week, and getting the book done. And he's quite He's quite, how shall I say? Hey, he's not real demonstrative, right? He's quite introverted, and every so often he goes, "This is really fun," and then he gets back to the work, and so he's really enjoying just acquiring this skill, just like learning to play the guitar or learning to dance or learning to ride a horse. I mean, it's just some new skill that he's acquired, and I love it because I love coaching somebody through their first book and then watching them really fly when it comes to, like, their second and third. Often they come back to me, but by then the process is much more streamlined, just because we know what we're doing by now, so.
That's really, really cool. And just what a journey that you get to kind of be a part of and help guide along the way. That's very, very neat. Bringing it back to Dear Alderone, what scene are you most proud of or do you love the most? Without spoiling anything, I should say, without giving away spoilers so that people will go read it.
There are a couple of them. There's one scene. Okay, so in the main family unit that's in the 1980s, there is Jira, the 14-year-old, her older brother Mike, who's 19, and her younger brother Brian, who is 6. And Brian does a couple things as a 6-year-old that I really like. At one point, he and Jira's mother go on what they call a rescue mission, and they end up with 2 Easter bunnies that have, or 2 real rabbits that have been dyed for Easter, that they save, because the people who had them were idiots, and so it's a growing experience for Brian, because earlier in the book you discover Brian has had a hamster that got wet and he took really good care of it, but it got wet and it died and he was heartbroken. And so you get to see this little boy who has been sort of a pain because he's a younger brother to Jira all the way through, and you get to see this boy just really grow as a character, taking care of these creatures. I love those scenes. I love the scenes where Brian's interacting with his rabbits. And there's another scene where the modern day girl, Raina, Jira's granddaughter, talks about watching Jira as an adult, as her grandma, go skydiving, right? And she and her younger brother watch her grandma go skydiving, and they think, like, how brave she was and how cool that was and what a great family outing it was. And I don't know. I like both of those scenes. Those are anchored in my head pretty well, because I think that often when you become a grandparent, I am not a grandparent, but I would imagine when you become a certain age, when you become a parent, or a new generation comes along, often they don't see you maybe in the way that you see yourself. And if you want to go skydiving and you're a grandma, go skydiving. Have fun.
Yeah. Oh, I think that that's just really beautiful. And then it's also, it's just a nice reminder too of, that your parents or grandparents both are real people and have
Yes.
had real experiences, many of which you aren't aware of. But it reminds me too, and I've heard other people say this in just various capacities, whether it's related to books or just stories in general, but like, ask your grandparents and your parents their stories and their experiences. Not everybody has a journal that they can turn to like see what they went through, but they have had so many life experiences. And so to me, this was just, I feel like we kind of need those gentle reminders to ask them and be curious about their lives. And so this was just a really nice reminder for me too, because they're not always going to be there. I know, like,
Right.
my grandparents have been gone for a long time, and they're not always going to be there. So while you can ask them what their experiences have been, what their lives are like. I mean, I think back to when when one of my grandmas was over too, and for a while she taught in like a one-room schoolhouse, and I remember sitting her down, and this is like, I remember writing it just down on a piece of paper as she was talking about the experiences. And so it's just nice to have that reminder too. We've there's definitely some emotions in this that I think, like we said, everyone can kind of relate to, even if it's not the exact same experience. But there's also really the beauty in exploring your family ties and the lives that they've had too, which is really nice.
Yeah, I'm glad you got that out of it. I was just talking to somebody, a couple days ago. My father's birthday was the 27th of April, just a few days ago, as we're recording this, and he passed away 3 years ago. He would have been 90, and he always wanted to write a book. He told great stories. He always wanted to write a book, and many times I said, "Dad, I know someone. I'll help you." And we just he just it was always someday. Yeah,
Crazy enough.
I know. Yeah, it's like, this is not difficult. And he never did. He talked about it someday never came. And so I remember some of the stories he told, but his book is not written, and that voice will never happen again, right? That voice is gone forever. And it breaks my heart a little bit. I wish that he had written his book.
Yeah, no, I think however you can, and there's so many different options, but to like capture those stories and capture the voices of the people that you love and the people that have been impactful in your life is really important. So this was definitely a wonderful reminder of that. You're very busy with your ghostwriting and your book coaching, but for you creatively, are there any new projects on the horizon?
Oh yeah. Always new projects on the horizon. I'm nearly actually there'll the next novel that'll come out. We'll see how soon it's done. But the next novel will come out is not as personal at all as Dear Alderone. It's more of a fun sort of what if experience. And it is about a woman who is a dog rescuer who has a history, who has sort of a skeleton in her closet that she would like very, very much not to remember. And she is blackmailed into rescuing what she thinks is an animal, and ends up realizing that she's kidnapping somebody very well known, and has to keep them off the streets for 6 weeks. So so it's a matter of her and her best friend as they sort of figure out how they're going to navigate this extremely dicey moral issue, um, while she tries to figure out what she's going to do for the rest of her life. So yeah, it's called The Lions Club.
Oh my gosh, how funny. You have to keep me posted. You have to let me
Okay.
know when it's coming down the road because that sounds so entertaining. Well, is there anything else about Dear Alderone or anything that we haven't covered that you would like readers or aspiring writers to know?
I think we've covered enough about Dear Alderone. I would love people to read it. I'd love to hear from people who if especially if it resonates with them. One element of Dear Alderone we haven't talked about a whole lot is Jira ends up with a really serious illness. She ends up having brain surgery, and that's what she's recovering from when she's in the hospital. And we write what we know. It was the same sort of thing that my husband was dealing with, and it is not a death sentence. And I think that that's really important. Like there's enormous hope by the end of end of the novel. It's not dark and depressing. As far as writing goes, I would like to say that there is merit in wrestling with the words and making them do what you want them to do and say what you want them to say. And with again, with the advent of generative AI, I would strongly caution anyone who wants to write against relying on generative AI to say something in your own voice. Take the longer time, wrestle with the words yourself so that whenever they are finally on the page, no one else in the world could have said them that way.
Thank you for saying that because I almost brought it up because you'd mentioned AI earlier. But I don't think I could have asked a question that would have brought about that answer so perfectly. So thank you for adding that in because I do think that that's very, very important today and is just another really good reminder for writers and readers as well, especially given just kind of the state of technology. So thank you for saying that. If any listeners would like to connect with you, where is the best place for them to find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Amy with an I, Amy Hendrickson on LinkedIn. And my website, Amy Hendrickson, is there. And then there's also the Dear Alderone website, too. There's a way to connect with me on that. So I'm pretty easy to find.
You are, and we will still link to it in the podcast notes as well, so that just make it even easier for everybody else. Amy, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, for the opportunity to read Dear Alderone. I enjoyed it so much, and I've enjoyed chatting with you. I hope that you'll stay in touch. Let us
No
know
doubt.
how everything's going when the new novel is ready as well, but I really appreciate it.
Oh, awesome. It's been my pleasure. Thank